questions, huh?
Third row left, Dan.
Ryan, Justin Fields lost his black stripe last week. Just what are the things that he did to get to that point?
Made plays, came out with a good attitude in terms of understanding what it takes to be a quarterback preparation-wise. Did a good job early on. He's only been in the offense here for, I guess, 9 practices, and so he's picked it up pretty quickly, overall. And so, the fact that he's able to kind of run the offense right now with not a lot of reps under his belt, is pretty significant. And then made a few plays with his arm and with his feet.
Kind of what's your plan for those guys now going forward, and what's your level of optimism that they can come back and contribute to this team at some point?
Yeah, I think anytime you deal with these injuries, you never want them to happen. If they do happen early on in the spring, it gives you the best chance to get back and rehab. We got the best people in the business, and Stu and our guys will do everything they can to get them back and ready to roll. So I never want to take and put limitations on when guys can come back, because everybody's bodies are different. And so, we're going to be pulling for these guys and, give them a plan and give them all the resources they need to get themselves ready for preseason. And, there's time to get those guys ready. So, we'll kind of see as the months go on.
Right next door, Colin.
Right, I know that Jonah Jackson isn't here right now, but why is he someone who you guys targeted, and do you envision him as more of a guard or a center?
Yeah, we always want to be at 16, and we were down a little bit going into the January there. And so, we added Enoch and DeWand, and then having Joan as an older guy to kind of fit, right there. When we lost Mike Jordan to the draft, that kind of was a hole inside. He can do both. He can play guard and he can play center, which gives us a lot of flexibility there and moving him in. So not really sure, coming in exactly where we're going to start him based on how things shake out this spring and who wins the positions inside. We'll kind of go from there. Also have Harry Miller coming in from Atlanta, Georgia. And so all those guys are going to be thrown into the mix in preseason. So you have that, and those guys all mixed in with Thayer. That's a whole other line. That's 5 guys. And so this spring, we've really been working with 2 lines because we don't have those 5 guys here practicing in the spring. And, it's worn down a little bit on the O-line. And so we got to get those guys here in this preseason so they can inject those bodies and then they can compete for some spots.
Is it tough at all to have sort of a competition when a lot of those guys aren't there yet?
No, I mean, obviously, if you're not here, you can't compete. But the guys who are here are competing, and they're putting, snaps on film. And so in the end, we'll put it all together and figure it out.
Front row, middle. Dave?
Ryan, is there any separation between Justin Fields and Matthew Baldwin at this point? Like, how close is it? Is there any separation between those two?
Now we're going to start looking at the completion percentage and who's moving the ball a little bit here as we get towards the end of the spring. Haven't really dug into that. I think later today I actually want to see the numbers and kind of see where we're at with that, because we're starting to get to the point where I think there's enough, snaps of film we can start to get an idea where guys are at. But as of I sit here right now, no.
I'm not going to ask if you're going to name a starter by the end of spring, but do you want to at least name a leader at the quarterback position? Like, this guy's a little bit in front at the end of spring ball? Or
I'm hopefully they're all leaders. They all need to be leaders. But in terms of who's ahead of who, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it shakes out.
Front row left, Bill.
Ryan, you guys seemed like you were pretty high on Josh Myers coming sort of toward the end of last season. Now that you've seen him through 9 practices, just where's he at, and how solid is that center spot right now? Is that a job that he's won, or?
I think that he came in kind of picking up from where he left off in the Rose Bowl practices. Bowl practice was a big deal for him. So a lot for the guys who haven't played, the bowl practice is like another spring practice, and I thought he came along in that period of time. I think he picked up from where he left off. Really want to see how he did today. He played okay on Saturday. And as we're starting to get to the meat of this thing, kind of where he's at, because this is where, guys really make moves. Middle of spring, we've seen the same plays, seen the same defense, and now guys really get an edge on each other. So interested to see how this week goes for him. But he's done a good job as he's been in there so far. And I think as we evaluate it through the end of spring, we'll have a better idea where he stands.
And then when you got this job and you were making your staff decisions, what from a player development standpoint and recruiting standpoint made you want to keep Greg Studrawa on staff?
Well, I think when you look at not only he's an Ohio guy, but what he's done with the linemen, not only here, but where he's been before, I don't think if there has, I'd like to know who it is. Back-to-back Remington Award winners. What he's done speaks for itself. Not only here, but when he was at LSU and some of the other places, and so his background was excellent. What I've seen him do in terms of development with our offensive line is why.
How about the recruiting aspect of his performance?
Yeah, I think last year, getting Harry Miller was one of the top guys we had in a long, long time. He's also recruited Nick Petit-Ferrer, who's one of the top tackles we've ever had here. So I think when you look at that, obviously as a group we wanted to make sure we put an emphasis back into Ohio, but recruiting nationally, it's been really good.
Front row right, Bill.
You're more than halfway through practice now, spring practice. Just generally, where would you say, has the team made as much progress as you would have hoped, and what areas are you really happy, and what areas are you still concerned?
Yeah, I think that the installation of the defense has been solid. I think that we're about where we thought we'd be there. Still working on fundamentals, still working on the calls and communicating on defense. I think that's one of the things that just being out there on the field, we got to do a better job of just communicating and talking to each other and having confidence. But they've been putting it on the field. They've been working hard in the classroom on defense, and they've been making a lot of plays, creating turnovers, which is good. On offense, we've been explosive. More consistent though overall. I think that anytime you're replacing three really good wide receivers, four guys in the O-line, and a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback, it's going to take a little time. And so overall, it's been good, but we're still looking for who the leaders are and who. One of the things when you have veterans have to play veteran. Now, these guys weren't starters, but a lot of those guys have played. KJ Hill, our tight ends. We don't have Thayer in there, but we're looking to get Thayer back. Brandon Bowen's played for us before. Austin Max played for us. So these, J.K. Dobbins, they have to play veteran for us if we're going to be really good. And I think that's one of the things about when you go to, put an offense or a defense together. How good are your good players? And it's in any sport. Just watching the NCAA basketball, if your great players play great, you're probably going to win. And so that's the same thing in football. And so I thought at times last year our great players were great. I mean, Dwayne was great. Paris Campbell was great. We had some of that going on. And so now it's okay, who's going to take that next step as we go through the spring into the preseason?
And you mentioned Brandon Bowen, obviously a very tough injury a couple years ago. Where is he in his development? What have you seen from him this spring?
His foot's much further along than it was or his leg much further along now than it was in the fall and then into bowl practice. And so he's had some time to kind of heal that up. And he's played a little bit of right, a little bit of left. He's does a good job being able to go back and forth. But I think having the rest of the spring to kind of get strong after the spring and get into the preseason, I think will really help him. But I think he's been solid this spring. I don't think he'd tell you that he's playing his greatest football, but he's still getting his feet underneath him because he has a lot of potential.
Front row right, Austin.
Ryan, there's been so much talk about the Ohio State defense now being multiple and versatile. If you're just going against them in a practice, how different is it from the last couple of years?
I think running the ball, it's similar. I think throwing the ball, it's a little bit different just based on the spacing and how things fit. You notice some of the guys, some of the linebackers kind of showing up, in windows that were different. And one of the things that happens in college football is because you practice against your defense so much, all of bowl practice, all of spring practice, all of preseason, and every day, you end up, getting good at the plays that work against your defense. And so we have to make sure we don't do that, is that we continue to make sure that we're covering all the different teams we're going to play, if it's a 4-down team, a 3-down team, a quarters team, a 1-high team, and so that we're diverse in that way and not get too caught up in trying to attack our defense and just making sure, especially in the spring, we're getting better at fundamentals and we're installing the offense.
How are you seeing that fit or chemistry, whatever you wanted to build there on the defensive staff? New guys, it's now almost through with spring almost.
Yeah, I think it's been good. I think they're finding their rhythm. I think that when you look at just kind of how it looks on the field in terms of how they're coaching it, how they're calling it, we have been doing some play it stuff so that they have to feel what it's like to call and who's calling it and if it's a tempo and third down and getting the personnel right. So seem to be getting into the rhythm. How they're working with their meetings as well. That all that stuff matters. And I think the players will tell you there's a good rhythm going there right now, and I think they feel confident. They feel like they're getting better.
Over to the right, Clay.
You got 3 or 4 options at tight end. Do you see them playing more? I mean, Kevin Wilson was talking about the receivers are competing, tight ends getting a little better. Do they push their way onto the field this year?
They're getting there. Yeah, they're getting there. I mean, they're a strength because we got everybody back, and they've had a good off season. So there is a place for that for sure. And then what happens is you end up not only competing by your position, but you end up competing by personnel groupings. So if the second tight end is better than the third receiver, then we're going to see two tight ends in the game. And we've been messing around with some of that this spring, and some of it's looked pretty good. And so that's one of the things that I mentioned this before. The strength of a college football coach is being able to adapt and being able to figure out what your strengths are, who the best personnel is, and then putting the right package together on the field and not just putting a system in, because although you're recruiting those kind of guys, you're not drafting, and you don't know exactly sometimes what you got.
Did you say you are calling plays this fall?
That's the plan. That's the plan. Letting the guys kind of do it this spring, but that would be the plan. Yes.
Why would they do it this spring?
Yeah, because I think you always want to get a feel for kind of the guys on your staff and how it would work if I wasn't calling it, and I think that's important. And we're going to switch up who calls it too. I think that helps, and just in terms of your staff development, I think it's important.
Front row right, Tim.
Speaking of that, is calling plays like getting to drive the car, and do you look forward to driving? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, explain the difference between sitting there and being part of it and actually making the call.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways people do it. I think some people, they script everything. They put their call sheet together where a robot really could call it, and everything. All the decisions are made, on Tuesday and Wednesday. There's other guys who have a little more of a different feel where they're going to come out and kind of spar with you early on in the first quarter, figure out what you're in, and then go attack you. That's a little bit more of our style and my style. And so, I think as you get good at it, you have to be able to make adjustments and then get into the right stuff that works against what you're seeing. But again, so much of it is done on Tuesday and Wednesday. Because if you don't have good plays and you didn't install them right and the players don't know what they are, then you can call whatever play you want, and there's still that same thing where every play is a good play if it works. It's a great call, I know, because it worked. You throw a bubble to Paris Campbell, great call, I know.
Really quick, it's just like a two-parter, but it's kind of interesting. Harry Miller, a lot of people thought in recruiting that Harry Miller could come in here and compete immediately for a starting center job. Do you see that at all in the cards? And then number two, just you guys as a staff, what are you guys looking for an offensive lineman now, and an offensive lineman when you go recruiting that's maybe a little different than the past several years?
Well, first off, I think, absolutely, Harry can come in and complete right away. First off, he's very intelligent, and he's been spending a lot of time, FaceTiming with Coach Stud 2 and 3 times a week, trying to pick up the offense. He's in Nicaragua right now on a mission, but he's still looking over his stuff, even in another country. But he's really been working hard in terms of lifting and getting himself physically ready with Coach Mick. Been videoing himself working out, and that's kind of part of our deal here. We expect him to come in here and play right away. And that was part of the conversation, the recruiting process. Yeah, in terms of, in recruiting offensive linemen, there's a lot that comes into it. There's certain body types out there. There's guys who are, just tackles, and they kind of have those body types, long levers, and they're athletic, which is kind of what we look for in our tackles. Then there's the swing guys who are they can play, multiple positions. Usually those guys are in the 6'5" range. They can move inside, they can go outside. Kind of Brandon Bowen's a good example of somebody like that. And then the guards are more of the thicker guys. So the guys, Wyatt Davis is a great example of that. Kind of a road grader in there. He can move a 3 technique. He can power in there. He can block a nose guard and not get knocked back into the quarterback's lap. And the centers are usually a little bit more athletic. They're again, kind of built lower to the ground, not as tall. Mike Jordan was kind of he was different. He was an outlier there. Usually the guys like Billy Price and Josh and those kind of guys are built more lower to the ground where they can move quickly and get their hands on you.
But this idea that y'all are looking for a more leaner type offensive lineman. Is that just wordplay, or are you guys looking for a lighter as opposed to a heavier guy?
I think when you look at linemen nowadays, even all those guys who were in the combine, they all look like athletes. They don't look like they used to 20 years ago, where they were just the big, heavy set guys. They're all very athletic nowadays, and you have to be a good athlete to be an offensive lineman. But again, it also depends on what position they play. Tackles have to be super athletic. The guards can be a little bit bigger and heavier set. So I think it depends on what you're looking for there. But yeah, offensive linemen are much more athletic than they used to be.
Okay, we've got time for just a couple more, because we've got a noon event going on in here. Far right, Tony.
All right, I know you're not scheming against your defense right now, but as a play caller, as a offensive coordinator, what goes through your mind when you've got a guy like Brendan White, Sean Wade in the same defense, both versatile? How does that alter your thinking when that's the defense you have to attack?
Well, you try to figure out in terms of like defensive personnel. Yeah, I think you try to figure out, okay, are they putting three backers in the game? If they are, what kind of matchup does that give us? And then when they take a safety and bring him down as a backer, as a nickel or a big nickel, okay, now what does that give us? And then you try to find their tendencies. You know, they're not going to do everything. So when those guys are in the game, what do they typically do? What's their job description? And so as an offensive, staff, you try to figure that out just in general, and then you try to take advantage of it.
When you have somebody, I guess, maybe putting in smaller packages and things with personnel, does that create more issues for the offense? Like the team scheming or trying to figure them out throughout the week just gives them more to figure out and look for those tendencies?
Yeah, it does. I mean, the more you can change up the looks but still be efficient at it, that's the key. I mean, it's easy just to put in a bunch of stuff, but now if you put it in, is it efficient? Is it working? And when you can do that and you can be really good at certain things in multiple packages, that's when you really got something special, because it's a lot harder to prepare for on either side of the ball.
One final question goes to the new kid on the block, Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Wanted to ask about the quarterbacks. You mentioned looking at their completion percentage. I'm curious what kind of traits you look for when you're evaluating those guys in that position.
Oh, yeah, we could be here for a while on that one. But obviously, when you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at accuracy, ability to stand in the pocket and deliver the ball on time, understanding the offense, managing the game, making good decisions in the run game, and trying to figure out who you are as a quarterback, because everybody's built a little different and their skill sets are different. And then do you use those skill sets to your advantage? And so what I mean by that is, if you can run and you're really athletic, do you do a good job making good decisions reading an end? If you're in the pocket, can you find your check downs? Those type of things as you go. But at the end of the day, can you lead 10 men on the field, and do you move the ball into the end zone? That's the goal. And then along the way, there's a lot of different details that go into it.
What have you seen from Josh Myers at center?
Yeah, I mean, again, a guy who's coming to work every day. He understands what's going on. He makes the calls. He's been in the system now for a couple of years, so I think he feels comfortable there. He's tough. He's shown toughness. He's got to bring it every day now, and he's got to be a veteran.